So it's been a hot minute since I've been on here to talk with you all about, well, anything really. Today we are going to talk about how, as parents of transgender children, people sometimes have a tendency to ask us about how we're feeling about anything and everything. It's kind of like a generic response when our kids are in the middle of all the things, right? They've just come out. They have changed their name or their pronouns, or maybe they are starting hormone um, treatments, or they are getting ready to have gender affirming surgery, or they have done a wardrobe change, or they have fill in whatever the thing is, right? Because there's all kinds of different things that your child could choose to do as part of being transgender, or they could choose not to do any of those things. Your child could just be like, hey, mom, or dad, or grandma, or whoever, I'm transgender, and then that's it. Like, that's the only thing they ever do, and that is fine. Like, that doesn't make them any less transgender than anybody else's child. But they could choose to socially transition or medically transition, and so those things come along with different steps and stages, right? And so as people observe those things, they are curious. And so they want to say something. And so the natural thing for them to do is to ask you, as the parent, how you're feeling about the thing. Which is always a little bizarre to me, because what I want to know first is, how's your kid doing? Like, how are they feeling about it? I'm always like, hey, that, like, what, this thing that's going on, like, that's great. How's your kid doing? Like, how are they adjusting? How do they feel about it? Like, that, like, tell me more. I want to know more. Like, I want to know what's going on with your kid. My experience has been that that's not always true for parents. And it may just be that I know a lot of people who are curious, and they don't necessarily know how to bridge that gap, or they don't know what the right thing is to say, or they're just not sure, right? And sometimes we don't want to say the wrong thing. And so we say what we think is like the closest best thing. And so we start with the person who we're talking to, like, hey, how are you doing? Like, how are you feeling? Here's the thing about that, right? As parents of transgender kids, we don't always know how we're doing. And sometimes how we're doing, we don't really know how to put into words, and we don't always want to talk about it. Sometimes how we're doing is complicated and complex, and it's a lot. And it's a lot to talk about. And in the moment that you ask us, it could just be we're managing, and we're managing how we feel, and we aren't able to say to you how we're doing, because just the kindness of you asking us how we're doing, like, is so emotionally big, right? Which, that's hard to explain. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's just hard to explain. But your kindness of just asking, hey, how are you feeling about this thing, sometimes just feels so big that for me to turn around and tell you how I'm doing, I just can't, because I might just cry just because you asked how I was doing, and I was like, man, that is so nice. Like, the person just like extended that kindness to me, and it just feels like too much. It just feels like too much. And so what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to smile at you and give you a shrug and tell you my default. I'm fine, because the default of my whole life is I'm fine, even when I'm not. And just move on, which is really unfortunate because I might love to tell you how I'm doing, or how I'm feeling, but probably not when you asked. Which is nothing against you and your question. It just was the wrong time. So, what a better question to ask a parent of a transgender child is when you hear that all those things that I already shared earlier in the video is, hey, offer like a something generic. Hey, that's great. Like, how, like, sometimes just that's enough. Like, if you hear somebody's kid came out as transgender, or they changed their name, or they have new pronouns, just start with, hey, that's great. And then see how that person responds. They may want to tell you more about it or not. Or you could follow with, could you tell me more about that? And see if the person wants to engage more in the conversation. And they may not be in a place where they can, and they'll let you know. They'll tell you, look, now's not a good time, or I'm not ready to talk about this yet. Or maybe in a week or two when I've processed this more, or whatever. We're adults, so we can handle these kind of hard questions. Or then they might just give you more information that you've asked for, and then continue on with the conversation. And if they're able to give you more information and talk about it, then maybe you could ask them, how do you feel about that? Or how are you feeling? Or how are you doing? If you gauge that the person is in a space that they are able to talk about it at that time. Like I said, not always a good time or the right time or whatever. So it's just something I've been thinking about the past week, because we've had, a circumstance in my family, and people have asked me that question, and I've just been in a space where, not that I didn't want to talk about it, I just didn't know how I felt enough to be able to answer the questions. And I was like, I'd like to tell you how I'm doing right now, but honestly, oh, there's my phone. I didn't know. I hadn't been able to process enough to be able to have a conversation about it. And sometimes that's a thing. Like, we just don't know how we're doing to be able to tell other people, like, what it is that they're wondering about. So that's all I have for today, and I hope everybody's doing good, and hopefully I'll be back here again next week and we'll talk about something new. Okay, bye.